Thank you.
Good night.
So welcome to the November 16, 2022 meeting of the Lake Bluff Joint Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. If we could have a roll call, please.
Certainly. Member Miller. Here. Member Danley.
Here.
Member Russell.
Here.
Member Sorensen.
Here.
Member Toll is absent. Chair Peters.
Here. And a notice was received by a member of the PCZBA in accordance with village policy, and Member Fisher will be deemed authorized to attend the meeting electronically unless a motion objecting to the member's electronic attendance is made, seconded, and approved by 2/3 of the members of the PCZBA physically present at the meeting. Is there such a motion?
No.
Hearing none, Ms. Fisher's request to attend the meeting electronically shall be deemed approved.
Thank you.
All right. Non-agenda item, agenda item number 2. As you are aware, we allocate 15 minutes at each meeting for public comment time to address any issue that's not on the agenda tonight. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the commission?
May I address during an agenda item?
Oh, yes, that'll be separate, yeah. Hearing none, we'll proceed to agenda item number 3, consideration of the October 19, 2022 PCZBA regular meeting minutes. Does anyone have any proposed changes or other revisions?
Just one quick change, Glenn, on page 3, third paragraph, hot tub is written hot tube twice.
We will correct that.
All right. Any other proposed changes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes as revised by Mr. Russell?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call.
You can do this by voice.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I would also suggest you, the PCZBA, consider a motion to take certain agenda items out of order, specifically that you would go to item number 6 and then back to item number 5.
Do we need a formal motion on that, or can we do it as a matter of right?
Without objection, I believe.
Okay. Is there any objection among the commissioners to proceeding with agenda item number 6 as agenda item number 5?
No. Nope.
All right. We should administer the oath to anyone who wants to testify before the commission tonight. Please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God? Thank you. Please be seated. Agenda item number 6 is public hearing, text amendment, restaurant hours of operation in the CBD. Mr. Cole, if you could provide us with a brief overview.
Certainly. So as you know, in the village, we generally regulate restaurants as a special use. That means they come before this body and the village board before they're approved. They also commonly have conditions on their applied to their how they may operate going to the future, right? So some of these are what you would expect, relatively pro forma. You showed us some plans. You have to follow the plans. You're subject to laws. You have to follow the laws, and so on. In the village, traditionally, we apply some other conditions, including limitations upon the hours that these restaurants may operate. So typically in the village, that has been no less restrictive than the applicant asks for, and from time to time more restrictive. And what we were asked to look at, and the village board concurred with and referred to this body to look at formally, was not doing that on a case-by-case basis anymore. Following the application of Lake Bluff Brewing Company in May, you requested, they concurred that we should try to establish a uniform set of rules on these hours of operation and work to get everyone, as it were, on the same gauge of rail. So this group has spent some time discussing that. We've brought an ordinance to you that matches your discussions, which is shown here on the second page of the memorandum. In short, It's a 2x2 matrix, if you would, right? There's indoor and outdoor, and then there's weekdays and weekends. So on the weekdays, you go from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. On the weekends, you go from 6 a.m. to midnight, and that's a restaurant's ability to operate indoors. And then in outdoor areas, those times stop an hour sooner, right? So on the weekdays, you can go to 10 o'clock outdoors. On the weekends, you can go until 11 o'clock outdoors. And it's important to note that this is, for all of these restaurants, this is less restrictive than what they're doing today. That's less restrictive than what they're allowed to do. This is a bit of bureaucracy and nuance, I suppose, but I think important to understand. It is not terribly typical to proactively amend special use permits like this. It's, they're made to be created and to run until the operator requests to amend them. But we do have the ability to do that. That's what we're proposing to do here. Typically, if you were to make it more restrictive, you would have to let people that are being subject to more restrictive rules, you'd have to let them keep going as it is under zoning. You may not have to if the village did it in some other way. You could regulate alcohol hours of service. You could impose just general closing times, but at least when we're talking about zoning, you have to do it this way.
But you said if there's a bonus to it, then we don't have to.
I mean, who would object, right? I mean, it's more
Just
permissive.
clarifying what you just said.
Yeah.
Okay.
Conversely, when we're talking about outdoor hours of operation, in some cases, in a couple cases, these hours would be a bit more restrictive. And it's worth noting there, that's not really so much a function of our zoning, right? That's a function of this is occurring on public property, right? Folks aren't paying a lease, they're getting a license agreement, and they're allowed to serve on the sidewalk, typically is where most of these operations are held. And so in a couple of cases, this would be, what you're seeing here is more restrictive, and we can do that, and that's much more common for us to work with those types of things proactively. So in total, we're looking at really three questions tonight. The first is, do you, presuming that you want to proceed with this text amendment, which is the big question, right? The first that the PCZBA should discuss is, do you like the hours that you have here? The second is, if you would, for those couple situations that would be more restrictive, would you recommend grandfathering those? So essentially the people that can go until 11 outdoors now could keep going until 11? That's your choice on what you recommend. And then the third is maybe even a bit extraneous, but it's on topic, is just, there are some businesses, some other parts of how the village manages the central business district deal with this hours of operation concept too. So for example, we generally stop amplified use of sound at 10 p.m. In the case of one business that's closer to residential areas, we've generally not authorized amplified sound at all, and we're looking for a bit of feedback from you as discussed in the memo on what those practices should look like going forward. Specifically in the case of Prairie Espresso, administratively, that ordinance lets us administratively determine what events to approve. We've typically not authorized amplified music outdoors there, and we're looking at going back to allowing an open mic night there. That's something that used to be conducted there, where one instrument or a PA could be amplified in the alley there, knowing that the alley, because it's an enclosed space, can tend to get a little louder than other parts of town.
Are we talking about weekdays, weekends for that?
I believe they typically did it on Thursday. I'm not sure what. Don't quote me on that. But I'm not sure there's a particular day of the week. If that's something of importance, we would certainly take note of that. So those are really the three points to focus on here. I guess as one other note, so typically when we send notice, we only send it to owners of property. So in the downtown, that tends to be, these are multi-tenant buildings. There tend to be a small number of landlords. In this case, as you requested directed, we sent that, in addition to those folks, we sent that to every address we could identify in our 911 system in in the downtown. So in theory, every tenant should have received notice of this. We did get a few back returned undeliverable, but again, made an extra effort to give people notice, and we believe that was heard loud and clear. So happy to answer your questions.
I think just a general question, Mr. Cole, whether or not there have been any complaints over the last year that's associated with hours of operation or noise or whatever in the CBD.
Yeah, as far as complaints, I know there was one business that briefly had longer hours than they should have posted, and they corrected that. Noise, from time to time. Previously, the outdoor block parties held around the Village Green. I think there's one particular band that tends to get some noise complaints, and based in part because of that, we started having, requiring that they stop the use of amplified sound at about 10 o'clock. That's all that's come to mind and that I've heard discussed in our internal staff conversations on this topic. I know the Prairie Espresso thing has been a sensitive area too. I'm not sure if there was a verbatim or an actual complaint there, or more just general concern.
I mean,
A specific complaint is maybe a better way to describe that.
generally, it seems as though the system has been working quite well. Is that a fair statement?
I guess I'm allowed to be asked leading questions. This isn't a courtroom, but sure. It's a joke. It's a pretty bad one. Still haven't found the time. Second City classes are tonight, and so I'm always
So you got a
here
conflict.
with you. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
Any questions or comments from the commissioners, or should we take testimony from the public, so to speak? All right, who'd like to go first? Yeah, if you could state your name for the record, please.
Can I use the, wait, the mics?
Oh, we got microphone right there.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, my name's Jeff Urso. I own multiple restaurants and stuff in Lake Forest and Lake Bluff. Here tonight to talk about Lake Bluff Brewery specifically. So I love that we're getting uniform, but I do want the, I hope that this commission recommends on a grandfathering in older businesses. The most unique thing about Lake Bluff that everyone loves about Lake Bluff, I think, is the summertime here. So other cities and villages have looked at us and really seen what has been done right for the last 15 years. And it's been done really well. We could always improve. I think to Mr. Cole's comments about making sure amplified music ends at a good hour, I think would be one of those things. But the important thing for restaurants.
What's a good hour, Jeff?
I would recommend 11, but I think 10 is fine with amplified music specifically. But I do think outdoor dining is here to stay post-COVID. I think it's part of our culture now. It's always been embedded in Lake Bluff. Lake Bluff is very unique with outdoor dining. We use our Village Green very well. I think it's where families and friends come together, and I think it's great. We haven't had any issues that I know of that would contradict that. So, I would ask this commission to leave the outdoor dining specifically to match current business hours. So I wouldn't ask for an extension or anything on business hours, but in the summertime, we're really talking about 3 months a year. No one's gonna be out there tonight. So, it's a little chilly. Bad joke too. I think
Appreciate the support, Mr. Urso.
yes, absolutely. But I think if we do consider in the summertime to allow patrons to be out to 11 o'clock, both Lake Forest and Knollwood to the west, you could have outdoor dining past those hours. So, and I do have restaurants in both of them, and we do have outdoor dining and sitting outside in both of them. In Knollwood, we're at 1 a.m. Lake Forest, technically, there is no rule, as long as you're in the business district, and our liquor license is 1 a.m. as well. As a business owner, we absolutely respect our neighbors, because we don't want our neighbors coming to meetings like this complaining about us. So we want to make sure that we do it classy and tasteful, and make sure our neighbors enjoy us being there, and that's why a lot of times people do live near the downtown district, is because they want to walk uptown and they want to enjoy that. Lake Bluff Brewery specifically, being a little selfish, is definitely off the beaten path of the residential homes that I think some of these other businesses have to deal with the upstairs condos, et cetera. We are right across from the Village Green, near all other commercial businesses, right next to a train, right? So anyone that's hearing people talk at a respectable volume, I think is all right with that. So I hope this board considers allowing Lake Bluff to keep its current hours.
So you're thinking that slightly expanded time frame would be what, Memorial Day to Labor Day, or?
Yeah, I think that's totally appropriate. I mean, it's weather permitting, right? So
Yeah, it's all
if
weather.
it's storming out, no one's going to be there. So it's all about beautiful days, right? So if we're outside on a beautiful day, and that's when people want to go outside. What we don't want to do is, drive residents from Lake Bluff to Lake Forest or to some other place to enjoy outdoor seating, because it's going to end at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock might seem late, but I assure you it's not. So on a Thursday,
old did we
people.
look?
I know. I'm just saying on a Thursday night, 10 o'clock. Sometimes the baseball game's not done, the hockey game's not done. Friends are still out till 11 o'clock. So we're not talking about 1 a.m. We're not talking about pushing anything crazy. I think just matching the current business hours would be totally appropriate.
And Jeff, to clarify, you keep saying current business hours. What you're asking for is 6 to 11,
Yeah.
7 days a week.
Would you mind putting that one slide back up or scroll down a little? I do have some other holiday date suggestions if you like, but so where it says weekends and weekdays. So weekends right now we're talking about 6 a.m. to midnight, and we're talking about 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. and Sunday through Thursday 10 p.m. My experience starts to die down right about that time regardless. My fear is, like I said, a Thursday specifically. In the summertime, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, people are going to be out past 10 o'clock. So I think that is then we're dealing with, is someone breaking the rules? Is there an enforcement issue? Is there this and that? And I think it's going to put everyone in a bad position. So I definitely would recommend on weekdays specifically, definitely to keep it, matching it with business hours. Weekends, like I said, it's 12 p.m. 12 a.m. is curfew. It's when everyone goes home. So, I think that would be totally appropriate as well.
And the outdoor dining on the weekends is okay at 11 for you guys?
I would definitely say the weekdays is the biggest issue. I as an operator would prefer it to midnight. I think it just makes sense. For instance, at the brewery, and I know you've all been inside, is how hard it's going to be for us to tell someone not to go sit at one of those seats. Do we pull the chairs? Do we put a chain on it? Do we ask a customer to leave at that time?
My inclination is if nobody complains, nobody's going to care.
I echo your thoughts there, sure, and 100%. And but we definitely don't want to just create a policy to put us in a position to ask for forgiveness, and to have someone call in, to the police department, or our police definitely have better things to do than to come over for 10 minutes past a noise, complaint. So I'm hoping we don't, change the policy on that, specifically on Block 1.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you,
Appreciate it.
certainly.
Hello. Gary Lawrence, 362 West Prospect in Lake Bluff, and co-owner of the property with Soledad Design, Lawrence Interiors, Lawrence Framing, and Bluffingtons, 103 to 113 Scranton. Two things. One is, I think the idea of trying to get normal hours across the board seems to make sense. Whatever you decide on, I don't have any issues with the hours as they're showing right now. Where I think, as a building owner, we have an issue is the dealing with the amplified music in specifically the alley, which is adjacent to our property. I think when I look back on the main purpose of the alley was to keep that open as a walkway to do some businesses in there. But people that live in a building should have a right to quiet residence. And I think in the alleyway, when you have amplified music, even if it's past 8 o'clock, I mean, I can say right now that, you know, single people live there. I had lived in the apartment at one point with my baby, who's now 22, and, you know, it can be annoying where at 8 o'clock at night, you're hearing amplified music. So I'm in agreement that the way it is now, no amplified music makes the most sense, in my opinion, for an area that is literally adjacent to residential. The brewery, I don't feel is adjacent to residential because that's on the street, and I think, you know, the nearest residential may be the properties, the gray condos behind that building. But our building, you know, people should have the right to enjoy the place quietly. Any questions, you know? I know, one more thing, in the past, I know when they've wanted a special event or the pizza or whatever, I believe they don't have an ongoing permit to do that every night, and if there is a special event, then fine, go in front of the board, and if things get out of hand, you can always go backwards and pull the permits and say this just isn't working, you know? So I would think that Prairie could continue to apply for something like that, but to make it where they can have amplified music all the time, we are really against it, you know? People pay a lot of money for rentals, you know, and we want to keep those rentals downtown, not businesses in the second floor, which right now is all residential, so.
Just,
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Lawrence, just maybe for clarification.
Yeah.
So when Prairie Espresso does this, at least the last few years, what they've done is they've come in with a permit from, I don't have the exact dates handy, let's say, you know, May 15th to September 15th or something, and they'll say every Wednesday is this type of day, every Thursday is that type of day, and I think it was, again, every Friday or something was open mic night. So you're talking a special event, right? You're not talking.
Yeah, I don't
every
call
day
that a
indefinitely,
special
right?
event
But-
if it's every Thursday, every Friday through the entire summer. That to me isn't a special event, that's an ongoing permit. And I just don't think that should be allowed, you know, that, you know, you're bothering people in our building. It's not just the end people that hear it. In the one apartment, I've had comments from the second person too, you know. And I do not know how effective it takes place on the condos behind our building next to Village Hall. That I just don't know because I don't live there. But, you know, I do know from living literally in there, we could always hear noise in the alley, and I just don't think that's fair to residential, so. That's all.
Gary, what about if they did it indoors? Do you have an objection for that?
I wouldn't have an objection. I don't think you'd hear it, you know?
You may, but that's not an issue with you. It's just the outdoor alley.
Yeah, I think any loud noises that you would hear coming from, so I mean, you know, people understand you're gonna hear cars driving by, whatever else, and to Jeff's point about trying to enforce things, you know, that it's 3 minutes after 11, you gotta make sure everybody's off the street. I mean, that can be difficult, but if it gets abused and people start complaining, then you're gonna have to deal with it. You know, just like parking, you know, in town. It's the same issue. They're not out there every day, but when the abuse is there, the police come out, you know.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Who'd like to take the first pass?
I can. I have no objection to Mr. Urso's suggestion. I think it's certainly reasonable. Again, people will be out overflowing anyway, and if it becomes a nuisance, we can always readdress it down the road. They're isolated enough. I don't think it's gonna be a problem, but I think the problem does come in if these are standardized hours, that the more residential part of the central business district may become affected by outside noise, and I concur with Mr. Lawrence that that alleyway will generate increased noise because it's an enclosed space. I don't know why they can't do their open mics and so forth indoors, but that's not my business. But I would go with the extra hour on on Saturday and Friday for outdoors. And I wouldn't allow the outdoor mics in the alleyway. That to me is hindering, is affecting people's lives.
Elliot, did you say just Friday, Saturday, or I know Jeff was
Same
recommending?
Thursdays,
On Thursday, yeah, I mean, I don't think that would be a problem.
or keep it consistent all.
Yeah, keep it consistent. throughout the-
So bump it to 11
11.
PM, Sunday through Thursday, and midnight Saturday and Sunday, or Friday and Saturday.
Friday and Saturday, yeah.
For block one?
I suppose I would mention, everything stops, at least right now, at 11. So going to midnight outdoors would be a newer extension.
Well, the
which you can
question
do.
is, should it just be block one, because they have no residential around there? And that's, I think, is open for discussion.
That was my note coming in as I pondered it more over the last month, that block one just doesn't have the same constraints as the block here where the apartments are all right above, and that we should allow the extra hour for block one. And I know that results in a difference in businesses, but the people that opened the facilities in block 2 and 3 here knew they were open facilities right below an apartment. And it's not something that changed where there were businesses above. They've been apartments forever. So anyway, that's my opinion.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I guess I go along with what Elias and everybody seems to be saying regarding the hours, certainly for block one. The one thing that I struggle with a little bit is counter to George, what you're saying, yes, the restaurants opened knowing that there were people living above. At the same token, I mean, is there any way that you can start to educate the tenants above that they're living above restaurants? And maybe, I don't know. I mean, at a certain point, that reality kind of kicks in too. So I struggle with that piece a little bit.
There hasn't been any sort of push from block 2 or block 3 to expand the hours, is that correct?
In general, this is a proactive effort on your part and the part of the village board.
Okay, so and the amplified music right now is not allowed there, or it is allowed there?
Yeah, so there's not a strict ordinance on it, right? I mean, the
Okay.
dynamic is Prairie Espresso, there's a set of provisions about when they can host special events that comes from before they were indoors. That's when they were just working in a few square feet in the alley. And so it lets them bring in outside food vendors and lets them bring in musical performances. And there's some discretion there as to what they're, for us administratively to govern what they can do to, in a way that's, considerate of other properties. So our past practice for a while now has been not to authorize any additional amplification of sound there. I think there's a couple very small, like Muzak type of speakers that have been mounted on the walls for some time that you could tap into if you wanted to. That's really it. So you can bring a PA or you can bring a guitar amp or anything like that.
So they're not grandfathered for anything at this point that we need to be aware.
Correct, yeah, and I would say for clarity too, it's sort of a separate issue. It's kind of a tangential issue, but it's so much on theme. We wanted to hear the group at this time on this topic as well.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Any other comments from the commissioners? I mean, I think the proposal to make the modification for block 1 certainly seems reasonable. And the amplified music seems to be a legitimate concern, so I think we have to address that.
No, I'm just trying to parse out the two issues. I think I agree with block 1 as a separate place. I think this is something that if something were to happen with the businesses that are upstairs and that were to become residential, we would have to readdress this, because then that would change the nature of how we're looking at Block 1 right now. Block 2 and 3, it is different, but as Deb said, people are renting apartments there knowing that they're moving in above restaurants and above, the prime part of town. So there's a hard balance. I think the amplified music, though, we need to have block that conversation off, not to use block too much in this.
And can I make a thought here? The people who, Gary, you said that the people in the other half of the block, that's all businesses on the second floor, correct? There's nobody living up on the second floor, not of your building, the other building?
Black 1.
No, Block 2.
Right, our building has all residential.
The other
Two-bedroom,
building?
2 one-bedroom apartments. Then above, like where Salon and the Bluff is, all the way around the corner, Innovasi, keep going around to Twigs. I believe there are a couple apartments in there,
Okay.
but, there's a number of offices, obviously. Yeah, so that's a little bit more mixed. And I think that, if you move into an apartment above Twigs or, Innovasi, and you're close to the Village Green, you understand moving in that Village Green is there, that events go on. So I suppose you could say, well, people that live in an apartment have to understand that there are businesses down below that may play music, but that should be the same thing for the people that move a restaurant in too. They should understand that upstairs there are residents. So, to Deborah's point, I think you have to hit that happy medium, which is why I said, if they want to do amplified music, we'll apply for a permit to do it and see how it works out, limit the hours, don't make it till 11 p.m. And I think that's kind of what he's doing now when he has these events or whatever.
So we're saying just to make it a special event and not as a right, is what
Yeah,
you're suggesting.
I would think, I mean, I'm not for any of the amplified music when I have residents living there, but, to say 10 o'clock, I'll revisit it, if they apply for a special permit and come back and say, well, we want to do this till 11 o'clock, I'll say, that's ridiculous, People pay rent here and they live here, so,
Okay.
anyway.
Have we had any complaints from the people living above there? For any of this amplified music?
We have an authorized amplified sound over there for a while now to have received a complaint. I mean, certainly I know that's a topic of interest to those tenants.
So if we compromise and allow them to do the amplification on a basis of request, and then we can maybe have more information to decide in the future whether it should be a right or not.
I'd say we could work with that direction, yeah.
And that is what we thus far have done up until, we've done that in the past. We've issued those permits in the past, is what you're saying.
Yes, I'm not
be
sure
clear.
on the precise timing, but
Sure.
we did allow those, I remember, back in 2018 or 2019, I think the Croya band
The
performed back there.
pre-COVID
and-
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A
Okay.
long time ago.
Yeah.
In COVID time.
Right, okay. Okay,
You also might get people that love the music and open their windows.
Right.
I mean, we can't assume that it's a negative. We have to be careful about that.
That's why I think we need an experimental, just to see how it goes and then
Right.
make a,
Sadly, I don't have the authority to only prohibit bad music.
Could you work on that, please?
I will apply my best efforts.
Okay.
it's gonna be a hot meeting.
Just polka all the time. Yeah.
Just wanted to point out too, I do remember when they've had music down there that is amplified, and one time they had, I think, a guitar player and somebody singing, but another time they had a band with like 5 or 6 people, if I'm not mistaken, and they were both amplified, but what a difference. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
so, yeah. I understand what Jill's point is too. You don't want to take it away, you want to allow them to do it, but monitor it. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion among the commissioners?
Can we summarize what we discussed to date?
So what I'm hearing and might suggest the motion include, so on the ordinance that you would amend this table in section 10-6A-13 on weekdays and outdoor service areas, that in block 1, the hours would be from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. In the remainder of the district, that it would be from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's really the text amendment. That's your formal motion. Separately on this amplified sound issue, I think we have the direction that this group supports the idea of, you know, limited amplification for limited specific events there, and that we would administer that process in that way.
But we're not asking for a motion on the second part.
We're not asking for a motion on the second part.
Right, so really the motion is just on the recommendation to approve the ordinance, subject to changing the time to 11 p.m. for block 1 on weekdays.
Otherwise, the
Until
hours.
midnight on the weekend, right? Isn't that what we're talking
Yeah.
about?
11 on the weekdays outside and midnight on the weekends.
And I would suggest you carry that through
On
on
holidays.
those holidays as well.
Holidays,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just an hour later in block 1 for that whole column.
And then for the rest of the business district, it would be outdoor dining would end at 10 on the weekends. I mean,
Weekdays,
days, and 11 on the weekend.
correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
But that means, well, wait a minute, so that means Prairie on a Saturday would, oh no, that would be midnight, you're saying. Never mind,
Okay.
clear.
All right. Is there a motion? And if so, what is that motion?
I move that we recommend approval of the ordinance as drafted with the modification that for block 1, weekday hours, Sunday through Thursday, be extended till 11 p.m. And on weekends and the 3 holidays listed extended until midnight for block 1. Otherwise, it remains as drafted.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Roll call, please.
Certainly, Member Miller,
Aye.
Member Fisher,
Aye.
Member Danley,
I,
Member Russell,
Aye.
Member Sorensen,
Aye.
Chair Peters.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Hey, Jeff. Yes, sir. Did you say somebody died? I'm sorry. No? Okay. No, I'm sorry. That's what I heard. Okay.
You said somebody will if you don't modify the hours.
Civility is diminishing quickly, I tell you.
There you go.
Very happy that didn't happen.
Okay. That's why I had to clarify.
Agenda item number 5, public hearing, text amendment, comprehensive amendments, chapters 1, 2, and 4. Mr. Cole, if you could give us an overview, please.
Certainly, and I'll give you a very brief presentation on this one. So we talked about in October, there is a whole lot changing here and a whole little changing at the same time. It is Schrodinger's text amendment, if you would. So chapters 1, 2, and 4 are a lot of the administrative framework of the zoning code. They show their age. Many parts of this date back at least into the 80s and the 70s. Some parts date back to some of the oldest zoning regulations I've got on file here in Village Hall for the village, such as when we talk about fire limits. So village staff, the village attorney, we've worked very diligently to try to redraft these chapters to really pull apart a lot of the threads that have been wound together over the years and to try and get to a modern code, a code that's easy for people to understand, a code that's legally defensible, and a code that helps us as staff and the village attorney and you all do your jobs more efficiently, more effectively. In doing so, really two categories of things we tried to highlight in the memo, and when we've shared this with you. The first, some major changes, some policy initiatives that have been pending in different places that we wound into these changes. And second, some minor changes, just things that are a bit antiquated or that we just had to change to resolve them as we were working through this, that we nevertheless wanted to make sure you were aware of. So to describe each briefly and short, first, there's a tendency now more than in the past for codes to really talk in plain language about what they're trying to do. We've given you this purpose statement, really drawing from a lot of the village's past plans to talk about what we're trying to achieve aspirationally with our zoning ordinance. There's some provisions about special uses, so in clarifying that, how they can be transferred to subsequent owners, and clarifying that, there's more ability to change those plans administratively without having to come back through this body. Clarifying when special uses expire, which is a bit of an ambiguity right now. The historic preservation item we talked about at our workshop, again, giving a rebuttable presumption to landmarks that they should receive variations when they request them. A big set of changes around site plan review. That's a relatively generic ordinance in the village right now, generic set of rules. The ABR previously invested a great deal of effort into revising those rules, making them more Lake Bluff specific. Again, a common theme, allowing some minor changes to be handled more administratively or just by the ABR instead of going to the village board. But also really a lot about criteria, trying to make sure we're communicating what we're looking for, trying to promote good design, trying to promote even sustainability in some cases. There's more talk about bicycle and pedestrian accommodations and landscaping and things that we think are good urban design for Lake Bluff going forward. Use interpretations. Remember, we've talked about our big use table, or very specific use table in L1. This gives us some flexibility for businesses that aren't specifically in that table to still be able to open up business without coming to this body for a hearing and having to spend time and expense on that. And then more administrative items. One is appeals. By statute, people have a right to appeal certain decisions to this body made by the building commissioner or by village staff. So we lay out a process for how that should work instead of relying on statute. And finally, the settlement of litigation. We're trying to make a clear procedure so that if there are zoning matters in the future that need to be settled, those still go through a public process, but the village board can take that up directly in conjunction with settlement instead of referring it back down to this body where there may be less knowledge of everything that's going on in litigation and referring it back up. And it makes a more expedient process and quite honestly gives the public a more direct opportunity to be involved by pulling these things together. On the minor side, again, these are all teeny, but wanted to highlight them. Floor area ratio. When the village implemented its floor area rules, we said, there's a whole bunch of parts of a house that are counted towards floor area, but that was put in a way that means a whole bunch of parts of a business that wouldn't typically be floor area are floor area. So we're splitting those up a bit. We're pulling in different lists of what counts as an exception to height, like parapet walls and railings and things. Through lots, in some parts of the code, it says they have a front and a rear and they're different. In other parts, it says you take a front from both sides. It's very confusing, but we've said that they're both now fronts and rears and the more restrictive controls. So there are some lots in the village. We've interpreted it that way, and that'll be clear to them that, there's the setbacks they're working with. Sometimes we get applications that don't need all of the listed application materials that are provided. This gives us more flexibility to waive those and to get those in front of you. Again, you can always request materials that aren't there. And then just some general administrative matters about, when zoning relief expires and, what you have to do, like paying your escrow fees and following the law to be able to take advantage of zoning relief. So that's the very brief summary. Happy to answer any questions about that summary or about anything specific in the book. I guess the last note, we did give you a second physical binder. I apologize for that. We're happy to recycle it, but we wanted to make sure that you guys had plenty of opportunity to review this in depth and to have those changes highlighted for you in a way that could be easily navigated.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. All right, who would like to start?
I just have one tiny little comment. On page 64, design review, this is under the blue tab section, or when you go in the orange tab section. Blue tab is a little bit more recent, right? 10 dash,
They're the same, and then there's just red line in the second copy, but give me just a moment to follow along here.
10-2C-20. No, you're just missing a word.
10 dash.
And I'll put it up on
Page
the
64
screen.
in the blue tab.
Page 64.
Put it up on the screen to make this simple. We're looking over,
10-2C-20B,
okay. Without.
without.
We can certainly add that.
That's the only one?
You were disappointed that I didn't have one comment last time, so I found
I'm
something.
glad you did. No, I'd rather get it right, but,
And then can you, where, the language that we discussed earlier with the HPC, where is that specific phrasing inserted in this document?
Yes, right above it, actually, that subsection G right there.
Okay. That's all I had.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Ann, this is almost the Socratic method.
Pardon?
It's almost the Socratic method.
It is, and I really
Next month.
don't have anything to add either. I don't think I even found a typo.
All right. Any other comments or questions from the commissioners?
I just want to say, I think it's a phenomenal job that's been done to get this from, what it was and all the different pieces and everything into this new book. So congratulations to everybody who was part of that.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Fisher.
When do you do the next chapters? You don't have to.
Those are a little tougher.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion to recommend, I guess?
I'll make a motion to recommend as written. The updated
with
version.
with the addition of the without.
With the addition of the without.
Yes.
Second.
Second.
I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Certainly, Member Danley,
Aye.
Member Fisher,
Aye.
Member Miller,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Member Sorensen,
Aye.
and Chair Peters.
Aye.
Motion carries.
It's an accomplishment.
There you go.
You made Mr. Cole's day, I guarantee it.
See, that's
Almost as thrilling as Kansas basketball last night. Almost.
Close.
All right. Staff report, huh? Agenda item number 7.
Yes, sir.
Please proceed.
We have 3 items in total on your report. One's not included on the memorandum. The first is this selection of a comprehensive plan consultant. So as you know, we've tried a couple times in-house to get this effort going. The village board has set aside a pretty good sum of money to retain a professional consultant, some outside help to help us get this done. I don't think it'll be, subjectively, I don't think it'll be a radical change from the village's current zoning direction, but we're trying to weave together a lot of these individual plans. We're trying to create a new framework, and we're trying to see what opportunities we can find and capture and take advantage of in the process of doing that. 1997, this is certainly a plan that has lived a happy life, and we're happy to, try to give it a refresh. So we wanted to show this to you before we shared it with the village board Monday night. We wanted to share this with you, show it to you, share it with you before it's issued a little later this month, in case there are any comments, questions, feedback.
Certainly comprehensive, and as far as proposals go, I don't know too many, but this one seems quite adequate.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Good night, Paul.
George?
Yeah, I had a couple questions or clarification. In your introductory section here, it says that the Plan Commission Zoning Board of Appeals will primarily direct the preparation of the updated comprehensive plan, and then there's a reference to a steering committee. And the consultant should work with village staff and the steering committee to prepare a draft plan. Is the PCZBA part of the steering committee or not?
Yeah, to be more clear, that's intended to refer to this body plus any liaisons appointed by the village board of trustees.
Okay.
So they're still considering, I think it's, they may appoint a trustee or two, Open Meetings Act, to participate in your meetings when they're held on this topic. It's possible, I don't think under too much discussion, but it's possible that there could be some from other advisory boards as well. But principally, it'll be this body that's directing that work.
Okay. A couple other not as large questions or comments. I was surprised that you were indicating a goal of not updating the comprehensive plan for 25 to 30 years. That shocked me, considering that I did real quick Googling, and it seems like everybody
10 to
recommends like 10 to
15s.
15, and I'm
Yeah.
and we've been trying since 10 years after 97 to update it, so I was just surprised why we would send a message to the consultant that we wanted to be 25 to 30.
There's different timeframes, right? So I think, some plans that anticipate a lot of change move shorter. Some plans that are relatively stable move longer. There's definitely a difference between how long you look out for a plan and how quickly you expect to update it. So you might have a 30-year plan and fully intend to come back to it in 10 or 15 and do this kind of dive again. But if you're looking for something a bit closer in, I think, probably 10 to, anywhere between 10 and 20 is probably the norm here. And that 30, what have you, is a bit on the longer end.
You have 25 to 30.
30, yeah.
I don't know. I think it should be a shorter target time frame, because I can't imagine that we'll want to keep the next plan around for as long as this one was kept. That would even be longer, and we're already
Yeah.
saying that this one's way, way, way too old, and have been saying that for many, many, many years. So, another comment, I think where you explained that the village internally did try, twice initiated a process to update the plan, but then you say it was not adopted, and I guess we ought to just, I don't know why we just don't come out and say, both plans stalled primarily because we didn't have the staff to support the effort. That was the reason. It wasn't because anyone disagreed with the recommendations that were being developed. And I mean, there were hundreds of hours of work that were done over a long period of time. And
This knowing look,
I think we should
remember
just,
Russell and I commiserating.
I think we should just tell the consultants that that's we simply did not have the staff to do it. And I know for a period of time, I was the staff person being asked on a part-time basis to update the plan, and it just wasn't possible, as it wasn't with you, it wasn't with Brandon, it wasn't with, all the way back to Ryan, I think. So
I only
I
recently
think we
found
should
out.
just tell them and not make it sound like we, it wasn't approved. And then in the documents, where were all the list of documents that we're proposing sending them,
If I may, Member Russell, I will mention for edification, I am told, in one person's phrasing, the only reason the 1997 comprehensive plan was accomplished is that a few predecessors of mine ago, a man by the name of Chris Martin, currently Assistant City Administrator in Highwood, volunteered, I think, every Saturday for a series of months to write this final product.
I'm sitting right next to Chris during those years, so I know what he
There you
was
go.
going through. It was a tremendous effort. I think because there was so much work done, I don't see any indication that we're intending to share with the consultants all of the recommendations that were developed by the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I don't know why we would not, none of them were adopted, but I don't know why we would not want to share what the board at that time was thinking. I think probably only Gary was here at that time, but to me, it's an important flavor of a cross-section of the community as to what they thought should change. And I think literally, probably, we got close to about 70% of the plan being rewritten when it stalled on several occasions. And why would we not want to share that information? And maybe you're intending to share it, but it's not listed. And it surprised me that it wasn't in this pretty comprehensive list.
Yeah, I would respond. It's just it's a tricky topic for the reasons you said. So on the one hand, it has value, and I think we would share it. And I think our hesitation was whether to put it in this document or not, and whether to share it with consultants before the time for proposals or not. Both knowing, one, that it still is preliminary work product, right? It didn't, some of those were never acted on by this board, let alone the village board, or had community input, or so on and so on. And then also trying to be conscious of, not trying to prejudge outcomes, and especially not trying to, we'd really like to see what these consultants come back with for proposals. We're trying to intentionally not shape too much of how they propose this plan will be authored, or what it looks like, because many of these firms will be specialists in this planning. Mm-hmm. This particular line of planning, not just general municipal or land use, but in putting these things together.
Well, I hope we can share the information with them at some point. That would be my personal recommendation. And then I have there's a couple things where there's words missing or typos, but we state here that where we get into economic development, and we say it's because we have strong sector performance in automobile sales, I agree with, but then we go on and say building materials. And I don't think we have any lumber yards or anything like that in Lake Bluff, so I have a feeling
can't
that
talk
that's-
about individual taxpayers, but there is a lumber yard in Lake Bluff, if you look very closely.
Not enough to drive us over the top. The line seems inappropriate, like it was left over from another RFP draft, but just pointing that out.
Yeah.
To say that our sales tax revenue is strong because of performance in the building material sales sector. I must really be asleep if I don't know where that facility is that's selling all this material. But maybe they are. And I think that's it. I got a couple tiny little comments, Glenn, and I'll just share those with you separately, because most of them were typos. The only other subjective one was our description of our parking situation, where when you read this and a consultant reads it, he's gonna think, wow, they've got a supply of 563 stalls in our CBD, and we only need 478, and actually we cross-term Central Business District with the study area of the parking plan, which was a much bigger area that included the west train lot, the east train lot, and it's misleading to the consultants. It makes it sound like we have a gigantic surplus of parking when in the CBD we don't. So just a suggestion that maybe that get tweaked a little bit.
Glenn? Do you anticipate we'll be meeting with a consultant during our regular business hours or extra meetings?
Probably some of both. I think it would look a lot like your PRD drafting process. So sometimes those coincided, and sometimes with scheduling or with workload, they didn't. I will say there will be fewer people involved in this one, just from a scheduling perspective. I mean, it'll mostly be the 7 of you, so that'll probably make it a little easier to line this up with your regular meetings.
I think George made a very good point, though, that with respect to the historical work, we were quite far along in the process. We had a few commissioners that were very, very active, and that goes back to when they were on the planning commission. And
I was on that one.
yeah, Elliot was on there, and Sam and others. And I can't recall exactly how it derailed. Certainly when COVID hit, it was derailed, but there was considerable progress made. So at some point, whenever it's appropriate, that would probably be very, very good to show them where we were.
The progress ended when we combined, because then there was just too much work to do with the zoning to do anything with the planning. So this is, I guess, the ultimate result is we're paying $100,000 for something that may have been done by the committee itself, except for the administrative stuff, which obviously wasn't able to be done.
I mean, the upside is, not to say that this committee wouldn't have produced a good or a great plan. I mean, some of these, I think will have a very attractive, competition, and I think, you'll get, I'm certain you will get people that will make a better plan than, I and our staff could have come up with in-house.
Oh, I'm sure. I think spending that kind of money, I think hopefully we'll come up with a better plan than, or at least administrative aspect of it.
Well, and also, I'd be real excited to see kind of the input that they have from post-COVID world. The things that they're seeing coming down the pipeline, so to say. That I just think that a lot of things have changed, and how what are the ones that are important to us that we might not even be thinking of or something. So I like the balance of giving them the history, but then also being very open to whatever they're seeing out there in the world that could perhaps be used.
Yeah, I'd like to just add, with it having been on the sustainability committee for a little while, that while we are in a relatively protected site in Lake Bluff, in Lake County, in Illinois, compared to the rest of our country, we're still going to be facing increased stormwater, sustained periods of heat, and all of the topics here are going to be impacted by that. So our economics protect us to some degree, and the sort of folks who live here, but we're part of a bigger world. So it'll be very interesting to see where, 20, 25 years from now or less, it's going to be very different. So that's important to address.
Oh, thank you, Ann. Any other discussion among the commissioners? All right, thank you, Mr. Cole. Anything else from a staff report?
Yeah, so 2 more small items. One, apropos to Member Russell's comment, the village did receive a final report regarding a 2022 update to the parking study on Monday night. That was presented to the village board. We're working to get that consultant here to visit with you, speak with you at a future meeting of yours. of yours, excuse me. That may be December, that may be January. We're still working on scheduling. I suspect if we can't put it together in there, we may try to have Jeff Hansen or another member of our staff come make a presentation to you. But some interesting results, and we want you to be aware of those for your purposes going forward. The last one, your next meeting, we'll see what's going on with some of your policy work, but I expect will be mostly focused on casework, as it were, on the zoning side of your mandate. As a reminder, that's an exception to your regular meeting schedule. That'll be on a Thursday. I believe it's Thursday the 15th. So
What's
that moves-
this again?
Your next meeting, the last meeting of this body for 2022.
It'll be on a Thursday.
It'll be on a Thursday, yeah. So that's typically your regular meeting date would be Wednesday the 21st, which is getting pretty close to the holidays. So you'll remember at the start of the year, we moved that to Thursday the 15th. So a reminder to make sure your calendars are right.
Yeah.
We expect a bunch of applications, including, this has been shared a bit with village bodies now, but there's some proposed triplexes at part of Block 3. This is the eastern 2/5 of Block 3. I'll pass this around. You're welcome to take a look. So it only develops part of the site. It develops the part that's residential, and that we expect will be here for your consideration as a workshop at that time.
You anticipate a 7 o'clock start?
At this time, yes. It may be one of our longer meetings in recent memory, but it
Would be
should
different from
still
Block
be
3.
reasonable.
What we've seen.
It's pastoral.
Is that the, one building?
That's one building, again, on the eastern 2/5, so just the eastern 115,
Oh,
120
the
feet or so.
eastern. Oh,
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
okay.
So, again, the developer here, will need, current zoning. That part of the site is zoned R4, so typically you could have one single-family house there, that's it. They'll need at least one type, probably multiple types of zoning relief to accomplish this project. Even if they were in the R5 zoning district, floor area ratio wouldn't let them build anything to that scale.
So it's just on the east side of the Block 3?
Yeah, those eastern two lots, about 114 feet
They do the
wide.
whole block.
So that's where the part of it's a parking lot, part of it's the tree stand. The other, the line between the parking lots is roughly the lot line. So stay tuned for that. Of course, that topic may get some more public attention than usual. The rest, relatively routine. I think the only other application that might be of public interest would be the middle school. The PTA has been working for a while now on like a sport court addition out there that may come to you in December as well. I know they've been shopping that around to the neighborhood and others. So.
And the grass field next to the school?
Yes. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Agenda item number 8, Commissioners' Report. Any questions?
Same old Sam Badger question?
Well, you've seen the Block 3 news that we have. There's no news regarding Stonebridge or any other developments in the village I can think of.
Would the Block 3 proposal be a public hearing? Is that what's proposed?
I mean, ultimately, you would have to get to that point. I mean, this is really just a preliminary workshop.
Okay.
All right.
To be determined.
Anything else from the commissioners? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make
So
a motion.
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Get well, Deb.
Thank you.
Thank you for participating.
Okay, thank you.
This is pretty cool.
And it's only